Jared Vanderbilt. The name is quickly piercing through the hearts of Laker fans, being newly introduced to a player who for the last 3 years has overcome all of the odds. But there's a story behind Vando's rise, his emergence as one of the premier wing defenders in the game that covers the Vandalorian's why he plays so tough, with an undeniable edge on both sides of the floor. 6 years ago, Jared Vanderbilt was the 13th ranked recruit in the 2017 high school class. 3 spots below his fellow Kentucky commit Kevin Knox, and many spots ahead of future NBA superstar Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. But what wasn't really uncovered in all those mixtapes was his defensive prowess. At 6'8", he had the range to guard anybody, a player you have to box out or he's going to wreck you on the offensive glass, coinciding with athleticism and decent enough feel to grab a rebound and jettison up the floor in transition. At the time, Vanderbilt's stock was a safe first-round pick with lottery upside if he were to show more skill development as a shooter, passer, and ball handler. And to put a little bit more perspective in, by 24/7 Sports, he was ranked not only the best player in Houston, but the #1 player in the state of Texas. While he had offers from Kentucky, North Carolina, TCU, Arizona, Baylor, where he decided to enroll was Lexington, getting to play for coaches John Calipari and Kenny Payne in the fall and winter of 2018. And at the time, while Vando impacted the game everywhere, there were 2 main issues. The first, like most hyper-athletic forwards, he didn't have any jump shot. The second was a lot more problematic. Throughout all of high school, he was dealing with foot injuries that plagued his development, and while he was able to establish himself as one of the premier small forwards in his class through them, at the end of his junior year in June of 2016, all of that started to change. While attending training camp for USA U17, just weeks after committing to Kentucky, he suffered a fractured left foot. By the following spring, he was able to return to some tournament play as a senior in high school, soon to graduate and head to his first year at Kentucky. And at the JB Classic, in just 90 minutes, Vando showed out against the top prospects from his draft class. But then, with just 36 seconds left in the game, he suffered an ankle injury that also plagued him that summer moving into college. Okay, so now here's the good news. While a large chunk of both his junior and senior seasons of high school were plagued by injury, he was now finally going to Kentucky, and as a projected first-round pick, he was on path to make millions of dollars. And maybe just as important for the health of his surgically repaired foot, he would have the financial and organizational backing to get the best doctors and the best training methods to extend the longevity of his career. Except, that's not how it went. In an early September practice at Kentucky, Jared landed awkwardly on that left foot again, and immediately, Vando let out a shriek of anger and pain, hobbling to the 80s locker room. Right then and there, the entire gym fell silent. And in his own words, he said, "I thought it was over." But make no mistake, that wasn't him talking about the injuries. That was Jared talking about his NBA chances. At the time, the concern is, for a hyper-athletic 19-year-old, am I actually going to be the same player ever again? With all that's on the line, you're going to have self-doubt. Now, the good news was, after missing the first 17 games of the season, Vando would work his way back right in the middle of January, which is pretty tough in the middle of a collegiate season, but while working his way back into the flow of the college action, coming off the surgery, he was starting to play better and better. In one of those games, Jared suffered an ankle injury, which, trying to raise his draft stock, he was reasonably trying to play through. The bad news was, the more he played on it, the worse the ankle injury got. And so just 3 days before the SEC tournament, the biggest portion of the Kentucky Wildcat season, Jared's year was being shut down, ending with just 238 minutes to show. So while his teammates and Shai and Kevin Knox saw their draft stock rise into the lottery, Vando was the odd man out, slipping from borderline lottery to somewhere in between the late first round and the early second. But also keep in mind, at the time, Vando had another foot surgery to undergo, meaning he would miss individual team workouts, the draft combine, and basically the entire pre-draft process as he was recovering from another left foot injury. But even in spite of him missing each of the last 3 summers due to injury, where he couldn't work in that shooting ability and develop his skill set, there were a couple of teams around the NBA that saw something in his 238 minutes of tape that stood out to them. And so in the 2018 draft night game, Jared did not hear his name get called until the middle of the second round, when Tim Connolly and the Denver Nuggets decided to trade up a couple of spots to make sure they did not miss out on him. But here was the deal. What the Nuggets were getting was an injury-plagued, total unknown, a 6'9" forward with untapped defensive and athletic potential, but also an innate ability to grab a rebound and go in transition, run the break, and just create constant chaos with those athletic tools that he was blessed with. And so when he wheeled into the opening press conference in Denver, only a couple days after the draft, no one really cared about him. They were focused on another former top recruit from his class, and Michael Porter Jr., who ironically was another player that fell in the draft from what was the projected #1 overall pick to the 14th overall selection. And of course, like I alluded to before, the Nuggets really not tied into him at all. They got him in the second round of the draft, and were just intrigued by that skill set. But the first step for Jared was January 25th, 2019, where after 3 years of having the game stripped from him, with those constant intrusive thoughts of, will I ever be the same player again? Jared made his first steps onto the NBA hardwood. Now, he would play in the 2019 season only sparingly in garbage time, playing a couple of G League games, and it wasn't until 2020 that he finally broke out into a really good G League player. The issue for Denver, though, was they were on pace to win 50 games. And with so many good young players, Michael Porter Jr., Malik Beasley, Jared, Juan Hernangomez, they couldn't keep all of them. And so at the deadline, they moved Beasley, Hernangomez, and Jared to the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team largely desolate of depth and in desperate pursuit of a starting power forward. At the time, the Timberwolves had nothing defensively, and surely not a front court partner that could maximize Karl Anthony Towns on the defensive end. Now, Jared would only play 2 games for the Timberwolves in 2020 because, well, the NBA shut down right in the middle of the season. And so, after his first 2 years in the league with just 1 year remaining on his rookie contract, Jared had a lot of pressure on him. Not only would he have to stay healthy for the first time in 4 years to carve out a role for himself to get minutes, but when he got the opportunity, he had to show what he can truly be. And 2021 for him was another weird season. The Wolves missed Karl Anthony Towns for a good portion of it, and D'Angelo Russell for over half. Their 2 best players. But while people couldn't notice it through the lens of one of the worst teams in the league, Vando would carve out his role playing 18 minutes per game, starting in half of them where he showed off defensive versatility and a maniacal intent on the offensive glass. We're talking per 36 minutes, 4 offensive rebounds per game, and 12 total for a 21-year-old power forward still just filling out into his frame. So when they accepted his qualifying offer, agreeing on a 3-year, $13 million extension in July of 2021, no one really batted an eye still because the Wolves sucked. But in 2022, Vando finally got to live out his NBA dream. Starting in 67 of 74 games, their offense was janky at first, but their defense ranked top 10 through the first couple of months of the season. Beverly and Vanderbilt were the 2 charges that connected what was known as the Timberwolves' high wall defense, an aggressive style blitzing the ball and trying to create as many turnovers, just sheer chaos as they could. And in the process, Vando offensively, while incredibly limited and a total non-shooter, attacked the offensive glass like he was Dennis Rodman. But to really appreciate his impact on the game, you had to watch the entire thing, because one highlight would not do him justice. His motor was nonstop. And I'm sure you know, playing street ball, those rare athletes that just never run out of energy, no matter how many minutes they play. For Vando and his 25 minutes per game, that was the case. Except he is the rare breed of a player that is not just athletic, he was a rangy 6'9" wing, being now 2 years recovered from multiple foot injuries. And their 6-game series versus the Memphis Grizzlies in the playoffs, Vando would start all 6 games, with 3 of their 4 losses coming within 9 points or less. In Game 3, he finished with 6 offensive rebounds, grabbing 1 board after another and a handful of steals. Even if he couldn't shoot, he did literally everything else to maximize his utility. And for a Minnesota team that found their success playing faster than any other team in the NBA, Vanderbilt was at the forefront. But then in the offseason, Tim Connelly and the Minnesota Timberwolves decided to make a pretty big splash. That was with Karl Anthony Towns' struggles in the playoffs defensively, acquiring 3-time Defensive Player of the Year Rudy Gobert. And to make the salary structure work, and also to get robbed by Danny Ainge, they decided to include half of their team to get a regressing 30-year-old center that was getting played off the floor in the playoffs. So of course, Vando, on the second year of his 3-year deal, went to Utah. It was fun seeing Vando on a second team make a high-level defensive effort, and for the first few weeks, the Jazz, with literally no good defensive personnel, were holding up fine on that end of the ball. The issue was, Utah didn't want to play as fast as Minnesota, for a Utah team that didn't really quite need him. Here's the thing, any team looking to run the way the Wolves did last year massively needed a player like Vando who could be that tone setter. And so at the deadline, Rob Pelinka and the Lakers made a pretty big move, trading a first-round pick, which, by the way, could distinguish into a couple second-round picks if it finishes in the top 4, to reunite with former Laker D'Angelo Russell, Malik Beasley, and Jared himself. So it's kind of funny, Malik and Vando have been a package deal everywhere they've went. Those two have been traded 3 times in the last 4 years. And at this point, they're kind of used to it because no matter where they go, the one thing they share in common is helping teams overachieve. And as we saw last night in the Lakers' 27-point come-from-behind victory against Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, well, it was Anthony Davis and Jared Vanderbilt at the forefront. Let's dive in. The new-look Lakers had been starting Vando at the 4, with Malik Beasley at the 2 as well. And early on in this game, what else would it be other than Anthony Davis missing a mid-range jumper, and for some strange reason, Reggie Bullock did not read the scouting report that, hey, maybe it's a good idea to box this guy out. But as Vando finished this game with 8 offensive rebounds, that was not something Jason Kidd's team picked up on. Meanwhile, in this game, the Lakers were more than willing to switch Vando onto Luka Doncic, and you'll notice with Vando's length and foot speed, he's able to keep up with him. But how about the transition efforts? For all my Laker fans out there, I can't tell you how many times you've seen it already and how many more times you'll see it where Vando is well outside the frame of a play, but he hustles all the way back into it and is able to contain the ball. Here in this play, literally beats Luka Doncic to his spot, and while he stops the pop for a mid-range jumper, Anthony Davis is right there waiting, so then Luka tries to make a wraparound pass to Dwight Powell, but Vando positions himself right in the way. The pass is taken away, so he then tries for the other shoulder, but Vando notices it and reacts in a timely enough manner. But one of his better skills defensively is also getting around screens. He's an agitator, like many tone setters that if you give him a little bit of a hard bump, he'll flop, and in this game he drew 3 different offensive fouls by that sheer intensity and a little bit of flopping alone too. He's able to peel right off of Bullock, and with Luka getting downhill, sprints to his spot, is able to close down Luka's left shoulder with Anthony Davis sagging on that right side. When you have somebody tagged right into your hip like that, it's a little bit more uncomfortable to make that right-handed floater, which Luka is not able to connect on. But even when he's not able to get around the screen, now playing alongside a defender of Anthony Davis' caliber, AD can switch and contain the ball. So now here, Vando goes from almost a full stop at the logo to an accelerating sprint, is able to deflect the pass with Dennis Schroeder coming in across, and now we're off and running. Where Vando, if you don't contain the ball, can take it himself for 2 points with a good finishing ability. But this possession I love here. So Malik Beasley's matched up on a Luka coming off the inbounds play. With Luka surveying the floor, he's trying to notice the open man because Vando is not guarding anybody. He's instead tagging Luka on his left side, and he's stunting the double team a little bit. Luka can't get the pass across to Kai, so he opts the pass to Reggie Bullock. LeBron rotates. Vando's instinct is wait for that pass for Justin Holiday. And with Reggie Bullock not even looking at Kyrie on this play, he just takes it and he goes for a pick 6 in transition.
I said he's everywhere on the court, all 94 feet.
Boy, does this game feel like a game. This is why you keep playing, Mark Jones.
Oh, another spectacular bit of effort from Vanderbilt results in a...
How often do you see that? A little bit later in the 4th quarter, this was my favorite play. Markieff Morris gets a pass from Kyrie and makes the extra to Josh Green in the corner. Vando over pursues a little bit, and the moment he notices Josh Green dribble right, he spins and turns his back to the ball. Now, if this is Kyrie, you don't want to do this because he'll just stop and pop for a 17-footer, and you're not going to be able to defend him. Being Josh Green has not had that in his repertoire, well, you know where he's going. It's to the rim. So he spins off, beats him to the rim, and with Anthony Davis sitting right there, it's a near steal that turns into a block. Vando gets the rebounds, and we're off to the races. But now I want to make one thing here pretty clear. It's that Vando has been doing this for years. It's not that he's suddenly become this great role player, but now that he gets the opportunity to play in a market as big as the Lakers, who before this, outside of Troy Brown, did not have a reliable wing defender, now you get that, and a forward who kind of replaces what Alex Caruso brought to this team. For a player like AC, his greatest asset was contagious energy, making those hustle plays, and on the perimeter, he was rock solid. And in turn, those young guys will do all the heavy lifting and all the dirty work on the defensive end. Because in this stage of LeBron's career, he had himself a pretty scary foot injury yesterday. You don't want him to try defensively in the regular season. And given the Lakers' half-court offense was an utter train wreck to start the season, now you get a player who adds even more juice in transition. Vando is not a perfect player, but what he is the perfect tone setter. For Rob Pelinka and the Lakers, y'all better not let this one go.